Nick Boyd is going to give this Badgers team something they did not have last year. Let's talk about it. Offense, defense, and overall roster construction with the addition of Nick Boyd and Coach Gauthier. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate you being here. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, and I appreciate all the everydayers for making this your first listen every single day. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today's episode, we are taking a deep dive. Badgers commit Nick Boyd from the transfer portal, point guard from San Diego State, offensive fit, defensive fit, roster fit, pluses, negatives, going deep under the hood with Nick Boyd. We got Coach Gauthier joining the show. Always grateful for Coach stopping by and joining us. Coach, let's talk Nick Boyd here. Let's start on offense. What do you like about the offensive fit here with Nick?
Nick, offensively, I just love, he's a true point guard. You and I have been talking about it, ever since Chucky left. And he's actually different in the sense Chucky was a true point guard, but Nick Boyd is a true point guard and he excels in the pick and roll action. Chucky was more isolation. He could come off of screens, pick and rolls, but I wouldn't say that was a strength of his game. Nick Boyd is extremely, extremely effective, extremely good in pick and roll situations. And, he's got 80 plus starts in his career as a point guard, played in a final, been part of a Final Four team. And he's this past year, he's been, in the Mountain West. So you got the experience, the level, and just the general being a leader of a team, especially in a pick and roll type offenses. I think it just gives a dimension that the Badgers have not had in quite a while.
Yeah, Nick Boyd, 13.4 points per game last year, shot 35% from three, 75% from the line. And let me just get right to your point. He's really good in the pick and roll game when you start to look at it in synergy, you start to grade it out. And I think what you see, and I definitely want your take on this, what makes a point guard really good in the pick and roll, some of it's just experience. He's been through those reps. He's seen it. He does a really good job with patience. He'll set up the pick. He'll reject the screen. He reads it. If they go under, he'll pull up and shoot. There's just no hesitation with him in terms of what he wants to do to manipulate the defense when he gets him in those situations. And that comes from experience. It comes from reps.
Without question, like you said, he is in full control of the situation. He knows how to get a defender on his hip. He knows if he gets him on his hip, how to put him in jail. What I mean by that, he kind of cuts off the angle of the defender, goes with a little stop hesitation to get the defender on your backside. It's called putting him in jail. He can get downhill. He can reject it. But the best thing that he just has a really good feel when the ball's in his hands because he's got a 2.2 turnover to assist ratio in his career that he's very comfortable, like you said, playing at the pace needed. But not only he can score it himself, but he's a true point guard in the sense he knows how to get shots for others. So, like, if he needs to go get a bucket, especially late in the shot clock situation, he can do it. But he knows how to read a defense, how to come off the pick and roll, read the big diving or popping, and get shots for others, which, again, especially with the way the Badgers now want to play with their spacing, the Kirk Penny influence with the spacing and just sharing the ball and being diverse, being very diverse in their offense and getting various looks with their skill set. I think what Boyd brings to the table is a big time get for the Badgers.
Yeah, and he's not the type of guy who you can easily game plan against to take one thing away because he can change it up. He can hit that mid-range off the pick and roll. We saw that. You see clips of him putting the guy on his hip and then pulling up for the mid-range. And then you go under the screen and he'll pull up from three. And then you maybe get a little too aggressive and he'll split that screen, actually. He'll split that double and get into the paint. Or especially coming downhill off that screen to the left hand, that's really dangerous for defenders. So there's just a lot of options he adds there. I want to ask you about the offense because you brought it up with Penny. This is kind of an element they didn't have last year with this really good nuanced pick and roll game, which can now suck defenders in and kick to shooters in the corners. This adds a layer to what they couldn't do last year offensively.
Absolutely. And you kind of hit on it too, Ryan. He can hurt you off the bounce. And he can also, he can shoot off the bounce coming off the pick and roll, or if you go under, he's a 37% career 3-point shooter. So if you go under that screen, he can stop behind and hit that. He can pass out of it. He can get downhill. It's just his diversity and how he plays that really opens the offense, and what Kurt Penny and Coach Gard and the Badgers want to do offensively, where you cannot key on one thing. Also, you look at his synergy stats, he's good in transition. And then as a spot up shooter, now he only spot up shot at 12% last year, but synergy had him rated as very good in spot up shot situations too. So again, to your point, the versatility that he brings, whether it's off the bounce, kicking it, driving, kick. And then the other aspect you and I have yet to hit on is his ability to get to the foul line. He got to the foul line 126 times. He's a 75% career shooter. The good thing is, in 3 or 4 years of history of him playing, all his numbers in the ranges are consistent each in and each year out. So exactly what you're getting with Nick, and just that extra dimension with the spacing and how the Badgers want to play. I think it's the perfect offensive fit for them.
Yeah, I love it. I love this fit, by the way. Maybe we should have started with that. I love the Boyd pickup, because the other thing he gives you a little bit of, I love that you mentioned spot up shooting, so he can pass it and spot up on the other side and still create gravity there. He'll also shoot off movement. San Diego State used him off some pin downs, some curls. He can get the ball and shoot off movement off the bounce. But the other thing he gives them, when you play an athletic perimeter team that maybe wants to put a little pressure on you, maybe wants to extend, he gives you somebody that can help break that, because he is a physical guard. He can push off. He can, create space against an athletic wing defender that wants to create some havoc right there at the point of attack. The Badgers haven't had that really, even with Chucky at times.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing, and what you're hitting on, Ryan, is correct. Like, he gives them wiggle. And Chucky, love Chucky. I've been a big proponent, especially how Chucky played this year for Louisville. But just Chucky doesn't have the wiggle that Boyd has. And then, like you said, if you try to press and get into Boyd, his change of direction, his change of pace is really good. He is just an alpha with the ball in his hands. He doesn't get rattled. He can beat pressure. He can beat traps. He can, however you want to play the ball screen. If you try to blitz him on the ball screen, you try to go under, you try to go over. He's just, like you said, he's well-versed, and he's just got an experience factor that he is in absolute control with the ball in his hands. And I'm sure we'll hit on this more. But it gives them, the Badgers, an opportunity to get Blackwell off the ball. And I just think that's going to benefit Blackwell. I think there was so much on Blackwell's plate. Klesmit did a nice job filling in, but he was a combo guard. He wasn't a point guard. Blackwell, combo guard. I think you and I both believe more suited for the wing, get the ball out of his hands. I think he's more dangerous. It's just, I hate to repeat myself, but I just really love this fit for the Badgers.
Yeah, I agree. And we're definitely getting into the implications for the roster construction coming up. Blackwell moving off ball a little bit more. I'm 100% with you on that one. I want to shift to here because, again, offense, defense, we're going to take a look at kind of both sides of this. Anything on offense concern you a little bit? The one thing I'll say, the one thing that I saw watching film is he is very left-hand dependent getting into the paint. There are moments he's coming off a screen and roll, and he's good with the right hand coming off the screen and roll, getting into the paint. But then he searches for the left to finish. And there's moments he made shots a little more difficult, I thought, than had to be, because he's trying to get back to that left hand to finish.
I agree with you in this sense. I guess the one thing would be finishing, especially over size and length in the wing. That the crazy part, and you bring up a really good point, Ryan, in terms of him finishing and stuff. Like, if you look at his synergy statistics in the analytics, he's 56% to his left, 44% to his right. So not a bad ratio in terms of that. But again, you can tell he's much more comfortable getting to the rim and finishing, going to his left more than right. But it is, I do like the analytics in the sense that he is very comfortable going to his right. Obviously, I think the one concern to what you're hitting at is, he's a lot more comfortable and, more importantly, more effective finishing getting to his left than his right. But I don't think it's a complete weakness in his game. I just think it's more of a strength than a weakness. But that is if you had one, concern or whatever, that would definitely be the case in terms of finishing.
I wanted to finish on this before I hit the break because I liked your free throw point too. Because one of the biggest things when Tanjay leaves, we talked a lot about the shooting, about some of the toughness, about his free throw rate was incredible. We all know this. And this is not a player that's going to replace that 1-for-1, but he can eat 70%, 60% of those free throws that Tanjay is taking out the door with them. That's a big deal for this offense.
It's a huge deal, and it's a huge deal for any team. I think a lot of, there were a few games where the Badgers shooting, they were cold and they lost strictly because they're shooting, but you didn't see those droughts. Or then the Badgers won a lot of games actually when they shot less than 30% from three. And it's, to your point, their ability to get to the free throw line. So they're almost recession, it almost helped them overcome cold shooting nights because they got so many freebies from getting to the foul line. And when you were in the top, 5% or, best in the country getting to the foul line like Tanjay was and stuff, it helps you overcome poor shooting or avoiding scoring droughts that we're used to seeing the Badgers in previous season go through, because they were the ability to create fouls. And then the second highest free throw percentage this past year in the history in the NCAA. They were kind of, it enabled them to overcome a lot of things because they were able not only to get to the free throw line, but take advantage of that. And then the ability at the end of games, especially with your point guard, with Boyd, to be able to knock down those free throws at the end because the ball is going to be in your point guard's hands. That's where I think his value is, even, being a 75% career free throw shooter and being comfortable in those pressure moments and those at the end of games to close out games. I think it's a great point on your part to bring up for him.
Yeah, wrapping it up, man. We both love the fit offensively with Boyd. We're going to pause there, come back, talk the defensive fit, a spot where the Badgers struggled last year. What can Boyd bring defensively? What are maybe some of the concerns there? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our friends of the show, and a quick second, as always, say thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one sports book that we go to for a reason. It's trusted. It's great. The user interface is incredible. The payouts are fast. The options are endless. Parlays, futures, teasers, spreads, it's all over there. And listen, the NBA playoffs are almost here, literally almost here. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. $5 bet. If it's your first $5 bet and you win, you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's $250 to spend on maybe a future for Badgers basketball if you want to, or Badgers football. Over 5.5 for the football team. I'm on that because every year I'm taking the over until I get it right. Right now, don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com. Claim your free $250 in bonus bets today. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, let's jump back into this, Coach. Defensively, this is a spot we harped on all last year. They scored 89 points in the round of 32 and did not move on. Does Boyd help the defense? What did you see defensively with Boyd?
I think he's solid. I would say average, maybe slightly above average. I don't think he's a great defender, but I definitely think he's an upgrade over what the Badgers have put out there. And just to your point, from an experience standpoint, but also from a body standpoint, nothing against Kamari, but Kamari always had limitations defensively because of his size. Boyd is listed at 6'3", 175. So, much bigger than Kamari. Even Max, we talked about, was one of the Badgers' better defenders, but I wouldn't say he wasn't shifty enough or quick enough to guard the opponent's other point guard. And I think Boyd will be able to guard the other point guards in the Big Ten, and he's not going to excel, but I don't think it's going to be a weakness. And if you compare him, to your point, if you compare him to where the Badgers have been defensively, especially this past season, I do think it's an upgrade at that position.
I'm curious if you agree with me on this, because you would know better than me. I feel like Boyd improves your point of attack defense. I think he's a better on-ball defender than what we've had. I think you take a little bit of a hit defensively in that second rotation, in that third closeout with Boyd versus a Klesmit.
Great point. And that was the one thing I was going to say. The one maybe weakness defensively and watching film on Boyd would be his off-ball defending. Particularly guarding offensive players coming off pin down screening actions. He was a half step behind and got caught up on screens off the ball a little bit. I agree with you 100%, Ryan. I think on the ball, his on-ball defense is pretty good. Off the ball, not as good, probably not nearly as strong as Max was being able to defend off the ball. I don't think it's a big weakness, but it's definitely not a strength of his.
Yeah, I think some of the closeouts you see, it's almost like just these little momentary lapses, which is true for a lot of players. That's why a lot of players at times aren't elite off the ball. There's some closeout stuff with Boyd that is a little sloppy, and then he allows people to straight line drive him. But I do think coming across maybe as a pick and roll defender, he gives you a little bit more. Now, San Diego State switched a lot, so it was a little hard at times to really track it. I think he gives you a little bit more in that aspect, though, which has hurt the Badgers and really forever.
Yeah, no, and a great point on that. I think he has the ability to get over the top of screens a little more just because he's so good offensively in a pick and roll situation. So I think that gives him an edge, how to play his angles or what he needs to do to get over those screens. To your point, some of those lapses defensively off the ball, I think he gets caught ball watching quite a bit. So when you get caught ball watching, like you said, you're a half step behind, or you're trailing, you get caught up on a screen, or you're slow to close out, you're a half a step behind on a closeout. A lot of that, I think, is because he probably gets caught ball watching a little more than he needs to be, something that you can clean up. But to your point, Ryan, I do think he will be better than the Badgers. And even Chucky struggled defensively playing pick and rolls. That was one of the things that you and I would talk in the past on Chucky, that his on the ball especially against on the ball screens, struggle a little bit. And I do think Boyd will be good, not great, but I think will be good enough and will be an upgrade to what the Badgers were able to do against that this past season.
Yeah, he feels, I think your first statement, I think, nailed it. He feels like a solid defender that can come in and help out with athleticism on the perimeter. One thing I liked about him, I just mentioned some of the closeouts off ball. And this was usually, I think you hit kind of ball watching. He was usually the second or third pass. The closeout would be a little forced. But when he was locked in, there were also clips of really, really strong contests, because he's a 6'1"-ish guard, but he's a 6'1"-ish with some length and some size. So he's not afraid to go out and really contest well. And then he has the foot speed in those situations to keep up with people when he's locked in. He can really lock in when he wants to, it looks like. And I think the foot speed and the length there at the guard spot is going to help you on the perimeter in isolation spots against the pick and roll. I think it's solid. I think it helps the Badgers here.
100%. I absolutely agree with you. I think, like you said, I think it's an upgrade. I don't think he's an elite defender, but he's definitely a solid defender. And, I think it's going to help the Badgers more than they were capable of doing this past season.
All right, we're going to take a break here, come back and talk about, is this the best thing that could have happened to John Blackwell? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for friends of the show. As always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you to all the everydayers, really just taking a little bit of time out of your day to be part of this show. Really do appreciate y'all. Let's bring Coach back in. And looks like I think he's moving his dog out of the way.
Yeah, sorry. My dog Lambo was trying to get some screen time. So my fault on that.
No, first of all, great name. Second of all, this is a dog-friendly show. I have a dog myself, so all good. I want to ask you this, man. You bring in Boyd, and we talked all last year about how I'm trying to word this right. This is no shade to Max Klesmit, but this team didn't maybe have a true point guard. Boyd feels like that. I feel like it shifts Blackwell off the ball. I think that's what Blackwell needs. I think Blackwell just needs to be I'm going to put the head down, get in the paint. I'm going to score. I'm going to be Tanjay this year. And this removes that ball handling element from his what he has to do. I think it's a huge potential gain for Blackwell in this sense.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Ryan. I agree. I think it allows Blackwell to become Tanjay. Now, hear us when we say this, Badger fans, not that he's going to be Tanjay, but it moves into Tanjay's role. We all know John's a different player than Blackwell, but it just frees. I can't stress how difficult it is on players and stuff when you're trying to play point guard when you're more of a scorer and point guard's not your natural position. It's just a lot. It's just being a point. There's so many different things, especially with what the Badgers are offensively and what they're trying to do. It just frees Blackwell up now to be in that Tanjay role where he can solely focus on scoring the basketball, which is what he does best. He'll still be able to be a playmaker. And, John has a good feel and, he's capable from an assist standpoint. I just think it's going to free him up. And it's also, you and I talk about this, players always are going to rest. They're either going to rest on the offense end or the defense end. I do think just from a rest standpoint and just having more opportunity to maybe play in longer spurts or more effective minutes, just moving John off the ball, I think is going to just be a tremendous gain for him and very valuable just to kind of ease that pressure or that burden of having to have the ball in his hands, knowing that he's got a true point guard to play with.
Yeah, I love that point. I think that point is so good because there is just you talk about the physical role, but there's a mental part of playing point guard that just is exhausting. And if you take that off and just say green light, go get buckets. Not that Blackwell didn't have that. Like I'm not suggesting he didn't, but with Boyd, just go get buckets, man. And let's take that mental exhaustion out of your game. I think you could see a step up from Blackwell just because of this.
And you brought it up earlier when we were talking about Boyd defensively. Let's not forget, as a scorer, it's a lot easier to score off that second or third action of being on the wing than when the ball is in your hands and you're running the point guard. So if Blackwell's playing the point, the ball's in your hands, you got 10 eyes on you defensively, and all eyes are on you. The defense on that first side is loaded up. They're in the gaps. They know that you're on top of the scouting report. When you're coming off the wing, you're usually coming off a second or third action. The defense has to shift. The defense has to rotate. Now you're attacking longer closeouts. You're, like you said earlier, getting the ball on the second and third side. Maybe the second side guys get caught ball watching. You get the defense to shift, move a little bit. It's easier to attack. That's why Tanjay, we talked about, he wasn't great off the bounce, but he was good off the bounce coming off, a pin down action or on the second or third side where he's got an advantage on the defender or he knows where that defender's going without help. And it just makes life easier as an offensive player, which I think that's going to be a huge benefit to Blackwell in his game.
Yeah, I'm loving this already because in my head, I'm already picturing a high pick and roll with, maybe it's Boyd and Winter, maybe a shooter in the corner. And on the opposite side, you have Blackwell and somebody else. You create this action here, skip it single side, or then you get that second sided pick and roll with Blackwell, who now has those reps from last year of being a pick and roll guy, of having those passing reps. But now you're kicking it to him off a rotation. The defense is in scramble mode. It just could be a killer type of offense to defend when you start to think of those type of actions that you can now manipulate with a guy like Boyd, kicking it to Blackwell for a second action. I love where you're going with this because I think offensively this could be absolutely dynamic.
It just frees them up, like to your point and what we're talking about, just frees them up offensively. That maybe takes a little more of the defensive focus. It's harder to focus on a guy when he's off the ball than when he's in the ball. And like you said, he can run so many different actions, and Guard and Penny and the staff do a really good job of putting, like with Tanjay, for example, this year in multiple actions. When you, as a defensive coaching staff or whatever, when you're trying to guard multiple actions with a guy that has the size and strength and the scoring ability that Blackwell has, and trying to figure out how to stop that off of multiple type of actions, it's really, from a coaching standpoint, it's really hard to stop.
100% agree. Let's shift here because I want to just bring in a couple of the, as we wrap up on Boyd, our deep dive on Boyd. We're going to be doing a deep dive as long as I can keep stealing coach's time on all the transfer guys. But there's a couple intangibles with Boyd I want to hit. The first is experience at the point guard spot. You mentioned this. He's been in a Final Four. He started 80-something games. I've made the point that having an experienced point guard is similar to having an experienced quarterback in a way. You just can't replace it.
No, you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, it is just, when you're talking 80-plus starts in his career of being a point guard, and like we talked about, playing at FAU, playing in a Final Four, and then playing in the Mountain West and stuff, there is no substitution for experience. And like you said, Ryan, a point guard is very similar to being a quarterback. And we talked about just freeing up Blackwell because, like you said, it's not just physically exhausting; it's more mental exhaustion when you're a point guard because you're in charge of the team and in charge of executing what the coaching staff wants you to do, both offensively and defensively. It's a great analogy being the quarterback. And I think, Boyd having that experience, and like you and I have discussed in the past with some other players that the Badgers have taken out of the portal and stuff, having that experience on a high level, a mid-major plus level, the Mountain West is one of the top, it's right behind the Power 5 conferences in basketball because I'm calling the Big East the Power 5. Mountain West has been ranked 6th basically the last couple of seasons in terms of KenPom and, putting 4, 5, 6 teams in the NCAA tournament. He's got that experience, and there's no substitution for that.
Last one I wanted to hit on. You mentioned, I think, half of this, which is he's really good in transition. Obviously, the Badgers have picked up tempo. They picked up pace. But the other part of this is he's a pretty good defensive rebounder as a guard. Averaged 3.9 boards per game last year. So what this allows you to do is have that guy who can not only rip it down, but then immediately get going without an outlet pass. And it just creates, again, some early offense opportunities that I think Penny and the staff are going to lean into with this roster.
Without question, just a lot of rebounding. You and I have talked about this in the past. It's really just want to and effort, and when we talk about his body type, being 6'3", 175, he has the physical capabilities and body to do that. But to your point, just looking at his statistics wise, he is a willing and able rebounder. And that's all about wanting to go get a ball. And that's what he does. And like you said, allows him to bring it into transition. And then the other piece of it is when things break down or nothing's going offensively, he's got that ability to create some sort of offense in a late shot clock situation. And that's, we've seen it in so many times, whether the Badgers have had that or not had that, being able to have that dimension from your point guard in particularly is so many possessions, so many games come down to how effective are you at the end of a shot clock situation. And I think Boyd is a definite upgrade for the Badgers in that scenario as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something I didn't even really think about yet. You mentioned, I love this because you mentioned, rebounding a lot of times is about just going to get the damn ball. Charles Barkley, for those who haven't seen it, is this great quote. You've probably seen this, but he said, everyone this is Barkley talking in his prime, right? And it's quote, everyone he talks about rebounding technique. I have a technique. It's called just go get the damn ball. And it's so true sometimes.
It's 100%. We talk about it every day in practice. See ball, go get ball. It's really that easy. And it's a mindset and it's a toughness factor. And you got to be willing to do it. But more importantly, the one thing in basketball that doesn't take any talent is effort. And rebounding is 95% effort. Now, there's some skill in the fact playing angles and knowing where the shot comes off. But in all reality, it's a mindset. It's a toughness. And to, like you said, the great thing about Barkley said, and, see ball, go get ball, just go rebound out of your area. And I think Nick is going to be a capable rebounder, and I think it's going to benefit the Badgers.
I love it, man. Always great when we get Coach on to get a little deeper knowledge here. I think we'll wrap up here. You and I both, I don't want to speak for you. I'll say this. I think this is a home run addition from the portal. This is a massive pickup for the Badgers. I love it.
It's a huge pickup, and you've talked about this on some of your shows and stuff. He was our priority. He was a option on their list when the portal came out, and the ability for the Badgers to go out and close a priority like this in the portal is just, it's enormous. And, you know, hats off to Guard and the staff to not only identifying a need and identifying the person that they want in that need, but in today's world, in the portal world, to be able to close that. It's just, you know, great job all around. And I think it's great for, you know, the Badger fans, and they're really going to enjoy watching him play.
Very well said. He is the great Coach Gauthier. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. Appreciate everybody all the time for all the support. Bunch more shows coming up this week. Make sure you continue tuning in. We got Nick Osten coming up. We got some recruits coming on. A bunch of content as always on Wisconsin, and we will definitely talk later.